Leonard Wheeler, this is Bob Lazzari and Tony D'Angelo in Eastern Connecticut. Thanks for joining us on Monday Night Sports Talk tonight. Leonard,
Good evening,
how's
Leonard.
everything?
What's up, guys? How you guys doing? Thank you for having me.
Well,
Our pleasure, kind sir.
The pleasure's ours, Leonard. And again, Leonard, I came across Leonard. I appear on that Thursday night tailgate as a commentator, and usually it's before or after Leonard comes on. But Leonard's always a pleasure to listen to, and you've done a great job. And my friend Chris Mascaro, who's been on this show and who I work a baseball show with, Leonard, him and Angelo do great work over there. I know you had a blast with them the other night. And,
they do a great job, man. I always enjoy being on that show.
Yeah,
no
it's great, and you come across great, and man, I tell you, it was great, and we're just glad you came on with us. But a little background about Leonard Wheeler. Grew up in Georgia, Tony, and attended Troy University in Alabama. Drafted by the Bengals in the third round of the '92 draft. Also played with the Vikings and Carolina Panthers throughout the '90s. Is now done a lot of stuff off the field with the NFL. Was the former president of the Charlotte Retired Players chapter for the NFL Players Association. Was elected as a member of the former Players Board Director for the National Players, not NFLPA, I should say. And again, he does Leonard Wheeler Enterprises, involved in a ton of things, and we can get to that as we go along here. But first of all, Leonard, you know, first of all, it's a small world because I'm looking through some of your old teammates, your old teams the other day. And, you know, you played with a guy in '95, Leonard, Ramondo Stallings. I'm sure you remember him because he was a big guy.
Yes, Ramondo Stallings. Yes, I do remember him. Where is he?
Well, you know, that's what I was going to ask you. But number one, Leonard,
where is Ramondo? Where did he go?
You know, I'm going to find out because, Leonard, get this. He grew up in my hometown, in a small town here in Connecticut. I actually worked with his mother in 1993 and 1994. She was teaching at a school in southern Connecticut. And I could not believe, I was looking through that roster. I saw Ramondo. He only played a few years in the league. But Ansonia High School here in Connecticut.
He had a lot of talent, had a lot of raw talent.
Really? Wow. Because
he had a lot of raw talent, man.
Wow. He was a stud in high school, Tony, much bigger than a lot of the guys that played here in southern Connecticut. But I just couldn't get over that. I knew his mom was great, nice lady, beautiful.
What a small world, though, right?
It is. And so I had to mention that to you. But let me start off by asking you, Leonard, you grew up in Georgia. You know, here you go to Troy University in Alabama.
I went to Troy. I was drafted to the Bengals out of Troy, but that is not where I started school.
Okay.
I started school at Lees McRae Junior College in Banner Elk, North Carolina, where in 2011 they ended up inducting me into their Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And after that, I actually went to the University of Mississippi.
Ole Miss.
And ended up transferring from the University of Mississippi to Troy University.
Oh, so it was a little...
So it was one of the best moves I've ever made in my life, though.
Well, it worked out. A business administration degree, correct, Leonard?
Yep, that was my first degree. Then I went back over the past 2.5 years and got another degree in communications, sales, and marketing.
God bless you.
It is great, and I was going to ask him later about that, but it's been done already. And then, as far as when you were growing up, Leonard, was it all about football for you? I mean,
yeah, it was my question.
I was going to basically ask you, did you follow any specific players, any guys you idolized? But was it all football when you were young?
You know what is so crazy, guys? Growing up, I was a Dallas Cowboy fan, and the reason I was a Dallas Cowboy fan is because they could never beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so, you know, I really started rooting for the underdog, even though they were not the underdog. They were the Dallas Cowboys. But I idolized Tony Dorsett. I mean, who did not want to be Tony Dorsett when they were growing up as a kid, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So growing up in a small country town in the projects of Georgia, all we did was sandlot football. But at the same time, when I came up through high school, I actually played 3 sports: basketball and track and football.
Wow. So, you know, I look at another thing that stood out to me, and I'm checking out your bio, Leonard. You get drafted, and you're not a big guy. You're listed about 6 foot, 190 pounds. Now, today, that would be really undersized, Leonard. And it really was
for a game. When I was drafted, I was 198 pounds.
Okay.
So I usually played at about 200-pound corner.
Okay.
Which which is so crazy because if you look at a lot of the corners today, they are like when you look at Rhymes for the Atlanta Falcons. Rhymes is about 5'9".
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at a lot of corners like Revis. Revis is not a tall corner.
No.
He's not a big man.
But what happens is that these guys are so cat-like quick. And you know, they actually remind me of guys like McMillan, you know, that used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, who was about maybe 5'7".
Wow.
You know, I mean, these guys were tremendous because they had a heart of a lion to want to win.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, piggybacking right on that, Leonard. You know, here you are, 6 foot, 198, in that area.
Yes.
You know, what strategy does a DB like yourself, 6 foot tall or so, have when you have to defend a guy like a Plaxico Burress or whatever?
A taller
you just
receiver.
answered it. Basically, the quickness of a Revis, I guess it's positioning, a combination of a lot of things, I would think.
It's a combination of a lot of things, but I can tell you this, though, is that, you know, corners, believe it or not, we like playing against the taller receivers sometimes because they're easier to jam off the line.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
So they have more of a body for these corners to be able to see. Now, a lot of times they might be at an advantage when it comes to the jump ball.
Right.
But really, not really, because the quarterback is not going to just purposefully overthrow the ball so the receiver can get it. He's going to try to throw a perfect ball pretty much most of the time. And if he tries to do that, then that corner really has the same advantage as the receiver at that point.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. Big targets to hit at the line of
Yep,
scrimmage.
big target.
He
and
makes
so,
an
you know,
excellent point.
We just, you know, and at the end of the day, guys, corners are a different mentality. And so when we go out there on that island all alone, we're thinking, this guy's trying to take food off my table.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, sure.
And if somebody breaks in your house and tries to take food off your table, what are you going to do?
Yeah, you're going to come out swinging, and that's what Leonard did
You're
during his
going to
playing days.
defend, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's on. It doesn't matter who's out there at that point.
No, that's right. It's a free-for-all. And, folks, we're on the phone with Leonard Wheeler, a former NFL defensive back who's been kind enough to join us this evening. Tony, question for Leonard.
And Leonard, good evening. I'm really, really blessed to have you, my friend. I'm just curious. Now, you're coming out of Troy University. You get the call. You're being drafted by the Bengals. You show up in the pro camp. Somehow I envision culture shock here. And can you kind of tell us what it's like for a college kid to kind of put his foot on a pro field and say, okay, here I am?
You know what? I mean, the expectations, you really can't even quantify the feeling itself because, you know, it is a lifelong dream. I told my mom when I was 8 years old that I was going to play in the NFL one day.
Wow.
And then, you know, you tell your mom, you know, just like a great mom that I'm sure that both of you guys have, she was like looking at me like, oh, good job, baby.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, then the reality of it really comes to where, man, I'm sitting in my dorm room and I'm about to get drafted into the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was amazing. I didn't want to have a party. I didn't have a lot of family members there. I just had my girlfriend, who's now my wife.
Yeah.
You know, we were just sitting there. The athletic director came in. Some cameras were there. You know, had some great friends there. And there I was, getting drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. I received a call. Ron Meeks, who's now the defensive back coach for the Panthers here in Charlotte, you know, called me and said, hey, you know, how you doing?
Yeah.
Are you ready? We're gonna probably take you in this round. And, you know, you hear that conversation and you're going, wow, I'm getting ready to get drafted.
Yeah.
But, guys, one reality hit me after I got drafted. When I got drafted, I was still broke.
Yeah.
But you weren't poor, Leonard. You weren't poor.
Then I looked around. I was like, you know what? I'm still broke. So nothing much has changed yet.
Yeah. And you got to go out and you got to prove that they drafted correctly and you're worth the goods. They must have known you were a good. You had to be a hell of a player in college. Number one, first of all, third round, Leonard. You're not the biggest guy. you're at a university that's not what you would call a football factory. They must have did their homework, and you probably had a heck of a career in college.
Guys, I'm going to tell you something that is going to shock you. I went to Leeds McRae Junior College for 2 years. I then sat out of football for 2 years. I did not play at Troy, at University of Mississippi, and I did not play football at my first year at Troy. I had 1 year to play in order to get drafted.
Wow.
So, and then on top of that, at the combine, coming out of a Division II school and transition to Division I, at the combine, I pulled a hamstring on my second 40.
Oh.
So here I am, coming out of a small school, but with great coaches, pull a hamstring on the second 40, was not able to do any drills at all for any scouts. I'm sitting there with a pulled hamstring, and all I'm thinking about is they're going to have to come and run me at my school. So now, you remember back then, they didn't have pro days. So I was running almost twice a week for pro scouts. And so pro scouts would come, and when they came, I would just go run for them, regardless of how many times I had to run a week.
And you must have been incredibly fast. I was going to get to the speed because you played with some of the fastest guys that ever stepped on a football field. I was just looking at, again, some of the guys that come to mind is probably right at the end of your career, Leonard, Rocket Ismail and Michael Bates come to mind.
Wow.
You remember them, Tony. Michael Bates, an Olympian.
Yeah.
I've never seen a guy, when he used to return kicks, it was just electric. And, of course, Rocket is aptly named Rocket. But Leonard had to be able to run with these guys. I would have loved to see some of those nice practices and foot races back then, man.
We had some rough practices now. But I can tell you this, though. Michael Bates was fast. But, man, Rocket Ismail, it
Even
was
quicker?
like that dude was from another stratosphere.
Really? Wow.
I'm not kidding, man. The dude was so unassumingly fast.
Wow.
That he could just, you know how you have some people to where regardless of how much they train, they're going to always be fast.
Yes.
Yep.
Or how much they don't train. This guy was just naturally fast.
Yeah,
And then, you know, I had an opportunity, though, to really play with, like, Mel Gray, you know, who played for Detroit Lions back then.
Great return.
I mean, I had an opportunity to play against some of the greatest running backs ever. People today would never know what it's like to play against Barry Sanders.
That's for sure.
And Emmitt Smith.
No.
You know, they would never know what it's like to play against these guys who were the pillars of running backs. I mean, they were outstanding the way you couldn't even. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, those aren't just legends. Those are all-time you know what I mean, Tony? Those aren't names that just we come across daily. And I mean, Leonard played with some great players. You're even talking like Garrison Hurst.
Yes.
And guys like this were good. Jake Reed was a great player. Chris Carter. I mean, there's some great players. But he's talking about legendary individuals that he was able to be on the same field with. And you know, when I think of Cincinnati, and Tony and I talk with this a lot, Leonard, Cincinnati, we think of the Big Red Machine. We think of baseball a lot.
Yes.
Maybe, I'm sorry about that, guys.
Well, I just telling, maybe you could tell our viewers
but you're our guest, Leonard.
How big of a football town is it? I mean, is it maybe anything you remember about the fans there?
Man, you know what? Cincinnati was, oh, God. You know, people give it a nickname, which I really don't want to say online, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Go ahead.
They call it the Nasty Natty.
Okay.
And you talk to anybody that lives in Cincinnati or that's visited there or that stayed there for an extent, they call it the Nasty Natty. When I first got to Cincinnati, you know, we did not have what they have today. Mm-hmm. You know, we used to practice over at Spinney Field where they had a waste field that was close by to where. So every day there was this stench of waste that we had to smell for 5 years.
That's Nasty Natty right there.
And so
welcome to the NFL.
But now when you look at Marvin Lewis and, you know, the Brown family, they've really picked up their game and really given these guys the experience that I think every NFL player should have.
Yeah.
And that's, separating themselves from college ranks and having a professional facility that looks like you want to go to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. And again, before I give you back to Tony, just some of the players that he played in Cincinnati with Tony that would ring a bell with people: Boomer Esiason, Carl Pickens, David Fulcher was a big defensive back.
What was Boomer like as a teammate, Leonard?
What's that?
What was Boomer like?
Well, Boomer Esiason?
Yes.
Well, let's just say Boomer was not lacking in confidence. I don't think he's lacking in confidence right now.
To this day,
he's never given that impression.
Yeah, but he was a great player and he was a great leader as well.
Mm-hmm. He seemed to have a lot of guts.
Great player.
Yeah.
The guys really respected him because of not just his knowledge, but the way he really carried himself as a professional.
I agree. He always seemed to, Tony, had a lot of guts.
Yes.
Lefties, you have the tendency that is how can this guy throw a football? Well, he did okay.
He
came
sure
out of
did.
Maryland and did a good job, and we know all the history. We hear him on daily radio now around in these parts.
Mm-hmm.
But and then some of the players that Leonard met up with in Minnesota, Tony, was the Randall Cunninghams, Robert Smith, Chris Cutt. Robert Smith, to me, he was a very tough back to Leonard and very well spoken. He did a lot of work for ESPN over the last few years.
And still working for them right now.
Is he? And I couldn't get over how smooth he was and how great that guy, how well he was fit out to be a broadcaster. You must be proud of guys like that.
Man, you know what? It is so awesome, really, to see guys transition because the transition process is not easy, guys.
No.
Yes.
Regardless of your education or regardless of how much money you've made, there's an emotional transition that takes place.
Yeah.
And there's a separation. It's like a death. So what you have to do is you have to bury something in order to create again.
Yeah.
And so what Robert was really able to do is to really make that smooth transition because, for one, it was all about self-awareness for him. He knew who he was. He understood his strengths. And when you understand your strengths like that, you're really able to make that smooth transition into a different career, a different path.
He's one of the best I've seen, and he's probably not one of the more popular ones, but one of the best I've heard or seen, and he's done a great job. He ran hard, too. I just remember him. You must have had some good practices with him, Leonard.
And, he was one of the fastest, smoothest people ever. The dude did not look like he was running until he starts running away from you.
Same thing.
And then once he starts running away, you're looking at him like, this dude is really, really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just amazing, man. I'm telling you, I was really blessed to play with some great Hall of Fame guys like John Randalls,
Yes.
the Randall Cunninghams, the Chris Carters. I mean, it's just, I was really blessed to play with some players that I know I'm going to remember forever.
That's right. 97, Tony mentioned John Randall had 15 sacks that year. He was a beast. He was a great player. Great player. Couple minutes left, folks, with Leonard Wheeler, who's a former defensive back in the NFL. Tony.
Leonard, you mentioned transition, and that really seems to be a critical issue for a lot of athletes. I mean, Bob and I talk about, our dinner time conversation was athletes who had millions and ended up in bankruptcy. And you've indicated that, you need to have, quote unquote, a character in order to bring you. Now, are you currently involved helping other NFL players make this transition? And what are you seeing? And are these guys getting abused? And do you have to sometimes intervene?
Well, you know what? Intervention is always a part of assisting anyone. One of the things that I've really seen over the past probably 10 years is that, these guys are very, very educated. And I think what happens sometimes, guys, is that, like I said earlier, there must be a death takes place. It's like a death because you're leaving something that you've been doing probably since the age of 5 for most of us and 6 years old.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now you don't do it anymore. Something you've been doing all your life. All of a sudden you're not doing it anymore. And so when it comes to that transition, a lot of guys really handle it well. a lot of guys don't handle it well because you're dealing with sudden money. And so it's just like somebody that wins the lottery. You know, most lottery winners are all in debt or broke.
Right.
Simply because it's sudden money. There's an emotional transition that takes place even when you receive the money, not just after the money, not just after the game is over. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Sure.
So there's some guys out there that's really, really, the NFL, I think, is doing a tremendous job. The NFLPA is doing a tremendous job in creating educational programs like at Harvard, Kellogg, Wharton Business School. These guys are able to go back now, receive different certifications in business, branding, marketing, and they're really, really picking up their game when it comes to transitioning from the NFL now.
Well, you do some great work. Again, this Leonard Wheeler Enterprises, Tony, it's such a broad scope of things you do, Leonard. I mean, to me, it was, I was looking down a list of things you do, the consulting and talking to youth groups, and I know you're a board director
Counseling
of the
players.
Youth Commission International there. But I was also surprised, well, not surprised, but very intrigued by your support of survivors of the Columbine tragedy. How did that all come about?
Man, you know what? That was probably one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, myself, Michael Dean Perry, Reggie White, Randall Cunningham, I think Chris even went with us, Aeneas Williams.
Yeah.
We went to the Columbine tragedy with the ministry, with Keith Johnson, Christian Athletes United for Spiritual Empowerment at that time. And, guys, let me just tell you, we were able to go on the campus of Columbine where one of the bombs that they had did not go off, and it was filled with nails and gas.
Yeah. My
And
goodness.
so, and then we were able to go into the Chatfield school where the Columbine had to go to school along with another school, and they both split days. So they had to go half a day, and then Columbine would go half a day.
My goodness.
And it was just amazing to talk to these kids that were shot. They were in the hospital, to talk to the parents of the kids, of the deceased, to pray with them. It was an experience that I can't even begin to explain to you how grateful I was to be a part of
You've
it.
done a very good job.
It's almost tear-jerking to hear about it, and the fact that you guys took such a proactive approach and talked to people who truly needed it and deserved it is amazing. I can't leave you, Leonard, without asking you about the Super Bowl. I think I know.
Oh, bring it!
I think you're leaning toward the Patriots, but I know as the week goes on, you're probably like me. Things can change here and there, maybe a point here and there. What are your thoughts about it right now?
About the score?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, give me a score.
Oh, man, a score. Well, you know what? People think that it's going to be this defensive battle. I just believe that Tom Brady had his bad game.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago or last week. And I just believe that the score is going to be 27-24 New England.
Oh, interesting. And it seems to be, it could be a 3-point game either way. Tony, could come down, as you know better than anybody, Leonard, one turnover can, in a tough, tight spot like it was in San Francisco, can do the trick. So last question, Tony?
Yeah, and Leonard, I mean, you're such a dear and thoughtful guy, and you've been in locker rooms, you've been with people winning and losing, and we've seen some playoffs where the endings have been oh so close, and we've seen missed kicks. And what's it like for that player, that like the kid that had the fumble, the kicker that missed the kick? I mean, what's the climate like when you go in and you've been giving it the best that you got? And, how do the players treat the poor guy that, committed the sin, so to speak?
Well, you have to remember, guys, it's so much emotion at that point. It's so much emotion. There's so much on your shoulder. There's this huge burden of wanting to win, doing everything you can to win. You went through this entire preseason, postseason. You went through this entire process for one day. And that one day was to get to the Super Bowl.
Right.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, this guy misses a kick. He has one job.
Yeah.
And that one job is to make a kick. And he would argue the same thing. I have one job, and that is to put the ball in uprights.
Yeah,
I didn't do that.
And he's got
the
enough.
kid
Yeah.
that Williams that kept dropping the ball. One ball hit his knee. He knew the ball hit his knee.
Yeah.
But he made the wrong decision not to pursue it. You know, and
Yeah.
then he drops the ball because he's carrying the ball like Deion Sanders, and then the guy comes in and knocks the ball out. You have one job, and that's to protect the ball. And,
Yeah.
man, when you go to that sideline, it is lonely. I don't care if the head coach comes over to you. You don't remember Jack.
Yeah.
All you remember is that I just lost the game. And it's one of the most traumatic experiences you'll ever feel in your life. And what these guys are going to have to do now is they're going to either build on that experience or they're going to allow that experience to continue to haunt them.
And taint them. Yeah.
Yeah, that truly shows you. Just to get to that level, Leonard, they have to have a lot of pride in what they've done. So it's got to bother them. It's just a matter of how they channel it from this day forward to see what kind of player and person they can be in the future.
That is exactly it.
Again.
Now they're going to have to dig deep and bring the true character out.
Yeah.
And the true will to want to be a champion is going to have to excel.
Well, again, Leonard Wheeler Enterprises currently, I guess if you go to leonardwheeler.com, you can get more information. Some of his clients, Tony, Bojangles, AAA, Ford, NFL, Lincoln Financial, a lot of people have used his services. And Leonard, we've just scratched the surface, and I know it's at the end of the football season, but you're always going to be welcome on this show, and I know on the Thursday night tailgate show, you'll be in touch with those guys, and please keep us in mind, and I'll be in touch. And thanks for becoming a friend and giving us a few minutes here
It's been a
tonight.
delight, Leonard. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Hey, thank you so much again for the invite. I really appreciate you.
The pleasure's ours, and Leonard,
Same
be
here.
well and God bless.
Thank you. God bless you.
Take
Thank
care
you,
now.
you too.
Bye.